we can send them the recording link when we send them the survey link.
Correct. Excellent. So we did a brief introduction just for those of you that were early birds signing on, but on this webinar today, you have many experts, including myself. I'm Tina McIntyre, Florida Friendly Landscaping Agent with the University of Florida IFAS Extension in Seminole County. We have Terrence Fullerton, our fertilizer educator, Tia Silvasi, Florida Friendly Landscaping Agent in Orange County, Jacques Werle, he's the Strategic Engagement Coordinator for Orange County Environmental Protection Division, and Megan Martin, the Be Floridian Now Coordinator for Volusia County. So we've come together today to give you information on fertilizing in Central Florida. So we're going to do a brief introduction of our counties. We're going to talk about your landscape and how it connects to the watershed. We're going to talk about lawn care best management practices and things that you can do in your yard. Fertilizer fundamentals, so keeping it basic because it can get very complicated. And again, those best management practices. And then finally, looking at county fertilizer ordinances. So this fertilizer webinar is brought to you by the University of Florida IFAS Extension, and we have offices in all 67 counties. So we've partnered today with Seminole, Orange, and Volusia counties. We have been running a fertilizer education campaign in partnership with our county and the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program in our county for several years now, and have been doing workshops for just under a year, year and a half. And we've done that through a grant for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the United States Environmental Protection Agency. So we've been able to bring on our fertilizer educator, Terrence Fullerton, and we've really, again, had a focus on free fertilizer workshops where we offer a free bag of fertilizer. So do keep an eye out for those. We will be continuing those. And really, if you look at the graph to the right, you can see that urban turfgrass fertilizer does account to a significant contribution in our Seminole County Wekiva River. And so that is why this is so important. So I'm gonna turn it over to Jacques.
Hey, good afternoon to you all. My name is Jacques Werle. I work with Orange County Environmental Protection Division, and my main focus is to help retail establishment, commercial applicators, residents be in compliance with our ordinances. So besides doing some public engagement and outreach to HOAs and different small groups, I work with UF IFAS Orange County Extension and doing some education and different outreach piece as well. So with us today, we also have Tia Silvasi, Florida Friendly Landscaping Agent from UF IFAS Orange County Extension. And next we have Volusia County with us. You are
Megan,
muted.
you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Martin. I'm with Volusia County's Environmental Management Division. If we could go back one. Thank you. Awesome. Oh,
Uh-oh, sorry.
okay. There we go. So just in a nutshell, Volusia County adopted a sustainability action plan in 2014. Green Volusia is a program which coordinates this plan's goals, including the county's fertilizer ordinance, and Be Floridian Now is a collaboration between many different groups and organizations, including Green Volusia. So Be Floridian Now is our education and outreach for our fertilizer ordinance and education. So, all right. Back to you, Tina.
Great, thank you. So you can see we have local experts, and again, this program is a University of Florida IFAS Extension program, which is the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And Florida Friendly is a partnership between the university and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And it's in the state law because we want to protect Florida's unique natural resources. So we do that through conserving water, protecting water from waste and pollution, creating habitat, preventing erosion, and fertilizing effectively is a really important part of that. And I just wanted to give a quick plug for the Florida Friendly Fertilizer Ordinance app. There's a lot of varying fertilizer ordinances throughout the state and throughout each county and city. So this app helps you better understand what your local ordinance says, but we're gonna do that specifically for Orange, Volusia, and Seminole today. But if you live somewhere else and you're curious, this app could be helpful. So like I said, the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program has 9 principles. And the start of that is really the foundation, is right plant in the right place. And that's important because if we have the right plant in the right place, we're going to be reducing inputs such as water, fertilizer, pesticides, maintenance, all different types of things. So we really want to make sure we have the right plant in the right place, and that could relate to sod, trees, shrubs, all kinds of things. Watering efficiently, we'll talk a little bit about that today. Mulching, that's always beneficial to your landscape to add organic material and help to hold the soil in place to reduce erosion. Fertilizing appropriately, we're going to be talking about that a lot today. Recycling, so at the top we're promoting our composting webinar, and Florida Friendly Landscaping really focuses on trying to reuse the material that we have in our yard. Attracting wildlife, we do workshops on trying to create habitat and how to foster pollinators and birds and things in our landscape. Controlling yard pests responsibly, so that looks at proper use of pesticides. And then we'll be talking a lot today about reducing stormwater runoff and protecting the waterfront. So your landscape, I'm going to turn it over to Tia. Or I'm sorry, the importance of water quality. So it really comes down to 3 aspects in what we're talking about today. Human health, wildlife value. So we talked about that, creating habitat, and we want to protect it because as we rapidly urbanize, we're reducing our natural areas. And so we want to foster that. And having good water quality really does protect wildlife. And then of course, recreation. So if you like to fish or boat or get out there, which is one of the few things we can do during this coronavirus pandemic, recreating is really important, and protecting our water supply for that is important too. So looking at more about what happens in a watershed. So when it rains, everything falls onto the various aspects of our waterways. So it could be, over a natural area or a suburban area, a farm, and that water is going to pick things up as it makes its way to our rivers and streams and lakes. And so we have in our urban areas the urban water cycle, which is different than the natural water cycle. So in one of our great reserves and preserves that we have here in Central Florida, we're going to have evapotranspiration that's occurring, and mainly due to our trees and forests. So the water falls as rain, and it's able to percolate down into our aquifer, and it purifies the water as it goes through the trees and goes through the rocks and sediments. And it's a much more natural type of thing with very little runoff occurring. When you look at the urban water cycle, which is a lot of our Central Florida region has impervious surfaces, and so the water's not going to be able to percolate down into that aquifer, getting that recharge of the aquifer and also that purification aspect. And with the reduced amount of trees, we're not getting as much evapotranspiration, which does cleanse the water, but it also prevents as much runoff. So in an urban system, we're seeing much more running off into our streams and our canals, maybe ditches, or culverts, things like that. And it's usually moving very quickly when we have our summertime storm. So when it falls over the landscape, we have what's called non-point source pollution. So that water basically picks up various things as it runs over our urban matrix. And that could include nutrients. So like we saw in the graph up in Seminole County, for our Wekiva River, we have nutrients from urban turf grass, fertilizers, including nitrates. It can also include phosphorus, which we'll be talking about more today. We can have bacteria and sediment through erosion. We can have toxic organic materials. And so non-point source pollution really just has a lot of stuff in it that's really difficult to track down and to remediate. So the way that it kind of manifests itself ecologically is we have an excess of nutrients. And those nutrients, instead of feeding our lawns and our landscapes, it's feeding excess algae and excessive weed growth. And so we have a reduction in water clarity and water quality. And this is as deemed by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So they do label lakes, rivers, and streams as impaired. And then action has to be taken on the part of the county and the citizens there. So when we get that reduced clarity and impairment, we can have fish kills. We can also have a loss of recreation. So if we have a lot of vegetation in an area, it really just reduces the quality of our experience. So for lawn care, now I'm going to transfer it over to Tia Silvasi, and she's going to talk a little bit more about the basics there.
Great, thank you. So people often think about fertilizer when it comes to their lawn and how do they take care of their lawn, but there's two other factors that you need to think about when taking care of your lawn. Next slide. So those two other factors are watering and mowing height. So overwatering can be a common problem in your lawn, and overwatering causes increased pest and disease problems. So you want to be sure to apply the water in proper amounts, which is including following your water restrictions based on your water management district, which you can find out from your utility company. And when you water, applying a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of water per irrigation event. So right now in Orange County, our watering restriction allows you to water 2 times per week. So you can water 2 times per week, applying about 1/2 inch of water at each time. So it's best to water early in the morning and keep observing your lawn for signs of drought. So overwatering can compromise the root systems, increase the pest problems. It also reduces the drought tolerance. So when we do get a dry period, it injures the grass more. And it can also contribute to increased weeds. Like if you have the dollar weed in your lawn, that's a sign of overwatering. So next I'm going to talk about proper mowing heights. Next slide. All right, so the proper mowing height will depend on your turf grass. And as we get into fertilizer, it's the same for fertilizer. If you have St. Augustine grass, you want to be 3 to 4 inches tall for the best mowing height. So this allows enough grass leaf on there to absorb the sunlight and make its own food. And so be sure to just tune up your lawnmower and keep your blade sharp. And then another recommended practice is to leave the clippings on your grass. So use the mulching mower setting, and that grass will help to fertilize your lawn. Next slide. All right, so as I mentioned, you want to keep your clippings on the lawn. In fact, the average home generates 400 pounds of grass clippings in 1 year. And so just use your mulching setting on your mower. And if they do end up on the street or paved surfaces, use the broom or your blower to blow them back onto the lawn. and they will just decompose and add valuable nutrients back to your lawn and reduce your need for fertilizer inputs. So thank you. And next I'll turn it over to Terrence to tell us more about fertilization of the lawn.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Terrence, and we are going to talk a little bit about fertilizers. If I can get the next slide to move. Okay. Like human beings, all plants require nutrients, and there are three nutrients that plants normally get from the environment: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. We normally don't call them nutrients because they are obtained from water and carbon dioxide in the air. The ones that we refer to as nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. And we call those macronutrients, macro meaning big, because of the large amounts of these nutrients that are needed. We also need smaller amounts of iron, manganese, boron, copper, molybdenum, and zinc. We call these micronutrients because of the small amounts needed compared to the macronutrients. However, a deficiency in one of the micronutrients can cause as much problems as a deficiency in the macronutrients. So even though they are needed in much smaller quantities, the micronutrients are just as important. And in Florida, we have a number of micronutrient problems that we need to address to get healthy growth. Next slide. Okay. The three nutrients that are needed in highest quantities are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen is a nutrient that is part of the chlorophyll molecule, the green part of the leaf. So without nitrogen, we don't have green leaves. Without green leaves, we can't have photosynthesis. The leaves cannot take up sunlight to grow. So without nitrogen, we get very poor growth. And in the majority of soils in Florida, practically all of them, the nitrogen levels are normally naturally very low, and we need to use nitrogen in our fertilizers. Phosphorus is a nutrient that is required by all plants also. It has a huge effect on growth, on root health, root growth. And in many parts of the world, phosphorus is a big problem, a lot of phosphorus deficiency. Florida is unique in that it is one of the few places in the world where the soils naturally have sufficient phosphorus. And as a result, we do not need to apply phosphorus in most circumstances. Phosphorus is also the nutrient that really starts the algae growth in our lakes and rivers. So we really don't want to use phosphorus unless we have to. And that's why it is not allowed in Seminole, in any of the three counties. You are not allowed to use phosphorus unless you have demonstrated with the soil analysis that it is needed. The third macronutrient is potassium, and it does not have a huge effect on the growth of the plant, but it does have a huge effect on the health of the plant. You get better root growth, you get better resistance to diseases, cold tolerance, less pests. It really enhances the overall health of the plant. Many soils throughout the United States, and in fact in a lot of the world, contain reasonable to good levels of potassium, and therefore it is not as commonly used as phosphorus. In Florida, it's just the opposite, where all of the soils in Florida are deficient in potassium, and potassium applications don't stay in the soil for a very long time. So in other parts of the country, they need phosphorus, but not potassium. In Florida, we need potassium, not phosphorus. The point I'm making is that fertilizers that are designed to work in other parts of the country do not work in Florida. We really need to have our own Florida-friendly fertilizers, which is why we have these various ordinances to promote proper fertilization. Next slide. Let's see if I got that. Okay, how do you know what nutrients your fertilizer bag has? The name on the bag says nothing. You might see a name like turf fertilizer, fruit tree fertilizer, ornamental fertilizer. Those names mean absolutely nothing. There's no law, there's no industry convention that says what name can go on what fertilizer. You can put any name on any bag. However, in Florida and in the rest of the world really, every bag of fertilizer must contain 3 numbers on it. The first number always tells you the nitrogen content. The second number always tells you the phosphorus content. And the third always tells you the potassium content, always in that order. So from looking at those numbers, you can tell what nutrients your fertilizer has. And therefore, in all 3 counties that we are talking about, where we cannot use phosphorus unless the soil analysis shows it's needed, that second number has to be 0. Now, how do you know which fertilizers your soil needs? I made some general statements that most soils don't need phosphorus, most of them need potassium, but there's no way to tell by just looking at the soil. You need to do a soil analysis. And there are various labs available. The University of Florida runs a laboratory in Gainesville, which can do a complete analysis for you. And it can determine your pH, which we'll talk about in a while. It can test the level of the macronutrients. Do you need phosphorus? Do you need potassium? And it can also test the levels of other nutrients, such as manganese and magnesium, which are really, really important in Florida. There are many soils where the manganese and magnesium levels are low enough that NPK fertilizers, standard fertilizers, will not work. And there's no way to tell without doing the soil test. At the end of the webinar, you will be receiving some additional information, which will include information on soil testing laboratories. Now, one of the things that has to be done with a soil test is the pH test or acidity test. pH is just the way we use to measure acidity. And this is extremely important, especially in Florida. Now, the scale we use, the pH scale, 7 is considered neutral, below 7 is considered acidic, and above 7 is alkaline. And most plants grow best in a value that is just slightly acidic, between 6 and 7. There are exceptions to that, but generally that's where you'd like to see your soils. And the reason for that is that's the area where you have most of your nutrients available. As your pH goes down too much, as the soil becomes acidic, you can have a lot of toxic elements dissolving. You can have excess iron, excess manganese, excess aluminum, and they all cause problems on soils. If you look at the photograph on the right, you would see that where you have a high or adequate pH, you get very healthy root growth. Where you have a slightly acidic soil, maybe a pH of around 5, which is too low for most plants, you get very poor growth. And where you have really low pH values around 4, your roots really do not grow well. This is a very common problem in Central Florida. I have seen many cases where people have applied sod, they've planted sod, and they have applied all kinds of fertilizers, they're constantly irrigating, and the roots simply will not grow. After a year, the roots have not developed. You can practically pick up the sod pieces still. And the plants aren't using fertilizers, they are not using moisture because the roots are not functional. And in many of those cases, the problem is acidity. The pH is too low. And it's very easy to determine that with the soil test and very inexpensive to correct it. I'm now going to turn you over to Megan, who will talk about best management practices.
All right, thank you, Terrence. So yes, so I'm going to get into some of the best management practices here for fertilizing appropriately and effectively in Central Florida soils. Okay, so the first thing that you should know about your fertilizer application is the difference between a slow release and a quick release nitrogen. So slow release nitrogen has a coating around the outside that allows for the nitrogen inside to be released slowly. The coating degrades slowly over time and allows that nitrogen inside, as pictured there on the left, to fertilize your plant slowly. In the photo on the right, you can see in the glass on the left, you have this white quick release fertilizer, and then on the right, you have that coated slow release nitrogen. So all three fertilizer ordinances in Orange, Seminole, and Volusia counties all require at least 50% slow release nitrogen if you are going to be applying the fertilizer. And that, of course, is at a rate of a maximum of 1 pound of that nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per application. So you will have to roughly estimate the square footage of your yard or landscape before applying that fertilizer. So I'm going to get into how to calculate 50%, whether your fertilizer is slow release here in just a moment. Some of the benefits, let me get to the next slide. So some of the benefits of slow release nitrogen, it's properly formulated, right, so that it lasts throughout the entire summer rainy period without posing that extra risk to our water bodies, which I'll get into again in a moment also. The more efficient use of this nitrogen means that you don't need to apply as much, and the slow release results in less nitrogen entering our lakes, streams, rivers, and oceans. So that's also very important. Let me go to the next slide. 1 moment. Thank you. So these illustrations here can show you how to easily figure out how much of the fertilizer's nitrogen is slow release. On the left, you're basically in both of these photos, you see this guaranteed analysis label. That will always be on your fertilizer bag, so you can find that. And at the top, it says how much nitrogen is in the bag. Total nitrogen on the left there is 14%. If you look down at the bottom, it tells you how much of that is slowly available or slow release nitrogen. So in this example, 7% of this bag of fertilizer is the slowly available nitrogen. Out of 14% total, 7 out of 14 is that 50%. And again, on the right there, you can see 8% slowly available out of 16% total would give you that 50% slow release nitrogen. So those would be compliant fertilizers during the proper time to apply. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. All right, so then another key point of our fertilizer ordinances that you should know is that you want to make sure you are applying phosphorus-free fertilizer. So all plants need phosphorus, right, as Terrence mentioned before, and almost all of these Florida soils that we're surrounded by naturally have all of the phosphorus that your plants will need, and it, generally speaking, shouldn't be applied. If you think you have a deficiency, you should take that soil test. If you do have a proven deficiency of phosphorus, then you can apply it outside of the restricted period, which I'll get into in a moment. But remember that phosphorus is that middle number of the bag, and that should be 0. We want to do no phosphorus unless you have that proven deficiency in the right period. Next slide, please. Doesn't seem to be allowing me to advance. All right, the timing of your fertilizer application is also very important. Don't apply, of course, when rain is forecast. You don't want to apply fertilizer. You also don't want to apply if it has just rained, if the soils are saturated, if there's any kind of flood, tropical storm, or hurricane watch or warning. You also would want to avoid fertilizing at that time as well. Thank you. So you don't want to let those fertilizers wash away in the rain. Historically, when we see the most rain is during that June 1st through September 30th period that's red there on the graphic in front of you. So of course, you don't want to fertilize within 24 hours of a rain event. It rains really hard, right? We have these summer rainy seasons. So June 1st through September 30th is the restricted period in all of our 3 counties here. So Orange, Seminole, and Volusia all have this same restricted period. Now you see that restricted period indicated in red here on this calendar, but outside of that, there are green periods, so you can catch the grass or the landscape plant while it's still growing, so it's not dormant, but it's not during that rainy season when it's posing, that extra risk to our water bodies during that summer rainy season. So there's that window before the restricted period and just after. So if you must fertilize, those are the 2 times to do it. All right, so if you must fertilize, just remember twice is nice. Once in the spring and once in the fall, with that 50% or more slow release fertilizer that will carry you through that summer rainy season without posing that extra risk to our water bodies. So again, here you can see in this graphic that that grass is illustrating when the most growth is occurring. So you have these windows of growth outside of the periods of dormancy where you would be able to fertilize those 2 times outside of those restricted periods. And with that, I believe I'm gonna give it over to Jacques.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Megan. So, are you choosing the right fertilizer, right? So, we've heard Terrence as well as Megan talk a little bit earlier about slow release fertilizer as well as the nutrients as well. So remember, many of the common turf fertilizers are not suitable for Florida. We have a lot of them that have high nitrogen, as we see here, but very little potassium, potassium in Florida soils, or unnecessary levels of phosphorus, right? Like this one here. And remember, only with a soil test that shows deficiency can you actually apply phosphorus in all 3 counties. A good, I guess, you can say ratio, right? A good ratio of fertilizer would be half, that potassium content should be about half the nitrogen that you have there, right? And again, that's at least 50% slow release nitrogen and 0 phosphorus. Next slide, please. So how much fertilizer do we actually need? And this type of question also relates back towards the mowing height, right? We have different turf species here. So the 3 popular ones, of course, that you all know is St. Augustine, Zoysia, and Bahia. And we're seeing the recommended amount of pounds of nitrogen per year. So for St. Augustine, for example, is 2 pounds, Zoysia is 2 pounds, and Bahia 1, which is really cool because that coincides with that mindset of if you are or if you need to fertilize, twice is nice. You can do that application before the rainy season starts, before the restricted period, right, around April, May, and then again in the fall and October after that rainy season has ended, and you will still have provided that recommended amount of nitrogen for those turf species. And as a reminder, all 3 counties have that maximum of no more than 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per application if you're going to do that. Next, please. Water in your fertilizer, of course, it's a good little reminder. Right afterwards, you just sprinkle some water and make sure it kind of settles and no wind or anything is going to carry that where it's not supposed to be. And with that same token, if you are using a broadcast spreader or rotary spreader, make sure you use a deflector shield, especially near water bodies, sidewalk, hard surfaces, because it does its job of deflecting, right? Preventing fertilizer granules from going where we don't want them to go. And for folks that have and enjoy waterfront, it is recommended to leave at least a 15 feet fertilizer-free maintenance zone next to that waterfront. So we're playing with nice natives or low maintenance that you don't really have to go out there and fertilize or disturb that area too much. Now, when it comes to summer fertilizer blends or micronutrients like Terrence talked about earlier, they are nitrogen and phosphorus free, right? So there's a great benefit in that because the ordinances are strictly targeting some of those main nutrients and trying to prevent them from polluting our water bodies. So with a soil test, of course, you'll know some basic things about your micronutrient mix that you should be getting. But some quick examples here, for example, right? Iron, as we can see, is a micronutrient that enhances color. Manganese is good for disease resistance, and lime helps correct acidic soils. In addition to that, compost can be used at any time. And with that any time, it's of course following those BMPs we mentioned earlier, not applying during a rain event or on saturated soils. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, when it comes to lawn care professionals, now this is for residents that are not necessarily taking care of the lawn, but are hiring professionals to do that. It is important to know that what's happening on your property, you are liable for. So it's critical that you do engage your lawn care professional, your commercial applicator, in ensuring and insisting that they are following the local ordinances and BMPs. Next, please. So we've gone through a lot of the different BMPs as it relates to general landscape. And a lot of those are echoed in our ordinances, and it's similar throughout, right? So we have no phosphorus unless a soil test shows that it is needed. Use a minimum of at least 50% slow release nitrogen. And for Seminole and Orange County, that stresses a 65% slow release nitrogen this year. Observe the restricted period. And for Orange County residents as commercial applicators, there are some training exemption associated with that as well. And stress, do not fertilize within 15 feet of any type of waterway or water body. Keep the fertilizer and grass clippings on the lawn where they belong, not in our storm drains or anything like that at all. Go to the next slide, please. So they do have some exemptions. Also, there was a question earlier talking about fruit trees. So all 3 counties have exemptions as it relates to farms, vegetable gardens, fruit trees, unless they are 15 feet within a water body, and in recreational or athletic turf, such as golf courses and whatnot. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to Orange County fertilizer ordinance, it differs in some way. First and foremost, it applies to all 13 municipalities, including unincorporated Orange County. But it differs. It has some components special to commercial applicators, residents, and retail establishment. So we're looking at that green poster there that says attention to Orange County residents. That poster needs to be at retail establishment where fertilizer is being sold. The certificate of completion, residents end up getting that certificate once they take our online training, which you can find here at our website that you can see on this slide down there. And then for commercial applicators, it's important to see that decal there. And once you see that decal, you should know that they have their license, right? They've taken the proper training needed to be fertilizing. And for commercial applicators here, please email epd@ocfl.net to inquire about decals, and we'll make sure that you get that. And now I'll be passing it on over to Terrence.
Okay, thank you, Jax. Seminole County's fertilizer ordinance applies to all the unincorporated areas of Seminole County. So strictly speaking, they don't apply to the cities. However, the cities of Altamont Springs, Castleberry, Lake Mary, Longwood, and Oviedo have adopted the same ordinance. So although they will be managed by different bodies, they're actually the same rules. The city of Winter Springs has a slightly different ordinance. The principles are the same, but they have followed the state model, so some of the details are slightly different, but the ideas are the same. And Sanford has not yet adopted an ordinance. So for residents of Sanford, we are recommending that they follow the county ordinance until Sanford comes up with their own ordinance. And Megan will now tell you what's going on in Volusia.
Yeah, so Volusia County's fertilizer ordinance applies to all cities in the county except for the city of Deltona. The city of Deltona is also similar to that state model ordinance. For more information about what you can do in your lawn or landscape, feel free to visit befloridianow.org. They have great resources listed on that website, and look for our flyers the next time you visit Volusia County fertilizer section near you.
All right, guys, so just wrapping it up here, a couple more slides. We need to implement these proper fertilizing practices to protect our waterways and to have a properly healthy lawn. We want you to realize that what happens in your yard ends up in our water and ends up, affecting our environment. So we want you to fertilize wise for healthy grass and clean water. You can achieve both of them using some of the things you learned in today's workshop. So we wanted to share a couple additional resources with you that are available on the website we've been sharing in the chat. If you go to tri-county-fertilizer-webinar.mailchimpsites.com, you can find a lot of the links that we're talking about for our respective counties. And be sure to check us out on social media and our web pages, and feel free to email any of us on your own who are representing your county. And one last reminder is to fill out our survey regarding today's webinar and let us know what else you would like to learn and how your knowledge improved today. Okay, and we'd like to thank you for joining us today. And at this time, we'll take any questions if you want to put them into the chat box, or if we missed any of your questions that you asked before.
Yeah, excellent. I did see one. Terrence, I think this would be a good question for you. Somebody was asking about how a product such as dynamite would interact with the variations in rainfall. So it's supposed to last 3 to 6 months. So I'd imagine the dynamite product's probably a slow release product. And so they're wondering how it's gonna interact with the rainfall. You could comment.
Yes, that's a very good question. And as you said, Tina, if it's a 3 to 6 month product, it definitely is slow release. And it does not depend on the amount of rainfall. If you have a really heavy rainfall, it is still going to release small amounts at a time. So most of the fertilizer would still be there after the rainfall event. There's no need to apply any more. And that was the whole purpose of the slow release fertilizer, to make sure that it's not washed out by heavy showers of rain. And that way you don't have to come back with additional applications. So no need to apply any extra fertilizer if you are using a product like that.
Great, thanks, Terrence. Yeah, we just had a question about a Milorganite product. So you do need to still know what the, if it's a purchase product, what the numbers are on that bag. But compost is actually exempt in all ordinances. So if you wanted to use compost on your lawn, that is something that UF is currently researching. What they're looking at is 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of compost applied over the top of the lawn. And that's going to enhance organic material and bring, really vitality to your soil. And for a lot of our new developments or even, older soils, we just have sand or maybe even fill soils. And so bringing in that compost adds those microbes, adds in, beneficials to your soil. So that's a great idea. So we had a question about Bahia grass. Just to make sure with Bahia grass, I should only need to apply fertilizer 1 time a year since it's a slow growing grass. I believe that was Terrence.
Yes, Bahia is a slow growing grass. It doesn't require a lot of nutrients. So you apply either 1 time a year, that 1 pound, or if you prefer, you can apply 1/2 pound twice per year, but definitely much less than using St. Augustine.
And again, like we talked about, we always want to start with a soil test. So we did include the link to the University of Florida soil test in the chat box. They are currently taking residential soil tests. It will be a bit of a delay than usual. It's a 1 week turnaround. So, maybe 2 weeks or something like that. But do get your soil test for any species of lawn that you have. And then I had a question about, if you fertilize your lawn, is it going to assist the existing weeds to grow? So fertilizer does not discriminate. You know, if you have weeds in your lawn, then yes. And if it leaches into our streams and our rivers, it's going to feed the algae. So, or, you know, the plants in the waterways. So, you know, nutrients are nutrients, and they're going to be absorbed by whatever plant they ultimately come into contact with. Our goal is to make sure that it's, you know, linking up with the sod that we want to fertilize. So, you know, just making sure that you do get rid of those weeds. We recommend, you know, hand pulling is obviously cumbersome, but it does work. When you're hand pulling, you want to make sure that you remove the root of whatever you're pulling out. And then, you know, now is really not the time to be worrying about weeds. If you have weeds that are very, very tall, all you can do is worry about getting those seeds. So don't let them reseed. That's going to bring more plants. What we recommend is treating for weeds during the winter when there's, you know, everything's dormant. You want to be tackling those weeds by hand or chemical treatment or whatever your preference is. Using, you know, integrated pest management so that we're not just, you know, we're always reading the label, things like that. And you want to use, if you have, you know, issues, you can consider using a pre-emergent herbicide before Valentine's Day. So we're not using a weed and feed, which combines the fertilizers and the pesticides. We're, you know, we recommend doing the pesticide and the, you know, well, the herbicide during the dormant months, and then the fertilizing comes in the active months, like we looked at on our webinar here. So we did get a question there about weed and feed. So any other questions here?
There was a question about applying compost. How often should you apply compost? And there's no restriction on how much you can apply compost to your yard.
I would recommend like twice a year. You don't want to do it too much because then, you know, that ½ inch will start to smother your sod. So, you know, you just want to try not do it too much. Yeah. Good
you could apply compost like once in the spring and once in the fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we
got to apply in the summer too.
We got another question about the certified landscapers, and so there's 2 options for that. I did post the link of the green industries. So at the University of University of Florida IFAS Extension, we teach the green industry best management classes, and landscapers come to us to get certified. This is the link that they get a certificate. Now it will be issued to their specific name. So, you know, John Smith, for example, but, you know, you can find out where they work as well and approach that company. But also Jacques shared that in Orange County, they do keep a database of registered people as well. So there's a PDF that he shared that you can also access if you live in Orange County. If you live outside of Orange, I just recommend that Green Industries Best Management Practices certification so that at the very least, they're coming to the University of Florida to get that certification and education. Okay, so we do have another question. Are regulations for watering and fertilizers different for private communities like country clubs? No. So this, if you live in Seminole County, for example, like Terrence talked about, it is applying to all cities within Seminole County with the exception of Winter Springs, which still has an ordinance. It's just the state model, so it's slightly different. And then Sanford hasn't actually adopted yet, but they're in process. So it doesn't matter if you live in an HOA or no HOA or country club. You know, these restrictions apply to commercial, to, you know, the only exemptions really are for those fruit trees, those vegetable gardens, for your golf courses, things like that, athletic fields, so school athletic fields, things like that. Everybody else is, you know, should be, and a lot of these are best management practices, so they're going to give you a healthy turf all the same. Okay, I guess we probably have time for one or so more questions. Did anybody else want to comment on any of these questions or?
I was just gonna add that if we haven't gotten to your question, if it got pushed up or something, our email addresses are right here on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to us with these questions, and we can work with you to make sure that they're answered if you feel that you haven't had your question answered today.
Great. Yeah, and then I see there's a question about CEUs. So for this webinar, because it is less than 1 hour, we're not able to offer CEUs. However, on that main page of all the resources, I'll put it in the chat box once again, but you can actually sign up for our Green Industries newsletter. And we will be hosting some webinars where you can get continuing education units for landscapers. So definitely sign up for that newsletter so that you can, very soon get information about the CEU webinars. And let's see, I had a question about newly sodded lawn. So new sod does not have roots typically. When they harvest it from the sod farm, we're really trying to allow those roots to grow. And so you do not want to fertilize. Of course, you want to keep in consideration everything that we talked about today, but you really want to wait after about 60 days at the earliest to fertilize new sod, because it's not going to be able to absorb those nutrients without the root system. So you do want to water every day for the first 30 to 60 days for new sod, because you're wanting to establish it and getting it going. So watering is very different than fertilizing, of course.
Tina, I just want to add to that, it does not only apply to sod, but the same idea applies to trees. When you plant a new tree, you should not fertilize right away, but give it a chance to recover a few months, because until the roots are actually functioning, any fertilizer you apply is just wasted money.
Yeah, and so I had another question about the soil testing. So the link that we sent, you can actually download the form, and you print that form up. You do the soil testing as they outline there on the form. Pretty easy. And then you're actually going to send that soil test along with the form up to Gainesville. So you don't have to go to Gainesville to get the soil test. You can just simply, again, print the form from this link right here that I just chatted, and use that form to take the soil test, send it up to the university. They'll process it and email you the results. So you don't have to go to Gainesville, and they do service that statewide. So that's a really nice service, and it falls within the ordinance for phosphorus. So it's a really great resource. And
So if I can just add on the watering. So for new plantings in Volusia County, new plantings can be watered anytime for the first 30 days as far as the watering restrictions goes, and then every other day for another 30 days. And you definitely want to keep your store receipt for the proof of purchase on that.
Yeah, and then just a quick plug for any of our University of Florida publications. All you're going to do, and I'll put it in the chat box, is if you just put in UFIFAS and then EDIS, and then into Google or whatever browser you use, and you're going to put in whatever topic you want. So you'd put UFIFAS, EDIS, gardening, UFIFAS, EDIS, new turf, whatever you want to learn about, and that's going to take you to the best and most recent publication available from the university. So the one I'm about to add is establishing a new lawn, and then Tia just shared one about weed management, and there's so much great information that the university provides you totally free, unbiased, and it's through our EDIS publications. So again, all you have to do is in your browser search bar, just type in UFIFAS EDIS, And then whatever you're interested in, it could be mole crickets, it could be rain barrels, or whatever you're looking to learn more about, and you'll find the most recent publication, or possibly blogs as well. And that's a great way to get reliable science-based information. Yeah, so any final question? We'll take maybe one more question, I guess. Does it count for Master Gardener CEUs? So I would talk to your Master Gardener coordinator. It is very likely it will, but it's up to your local Master Gardener coordinator in your county. So just talk to them, and you can send them any information, or refer to them to one of our emails if they're not familiar with what's going on, but they should be. So yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. Any final comments from our panelists, experts?
I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and feel free to reach out to me and Jacques if you're in Orange County.
Yep, I'd like to add the same. If you're in Volusia County, please email me, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
And Tina and I are available in Seminole County.
That's right, and we'll be posting, we plan to do some more fertilizer workshops and webinars for Seminole County. So if you're in Seminole, keep an eye out for that. And everybody stay safe, and thanks again for joining us today. And friend us on Facebook, find out all of our social media at that MailChimp page, and we'll look forward to educating and engaging with you next time. Thank you again so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.